Yo, what is up, guys? Del Boy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, following Joyce's resounding 10th round stoppage over Daniel Dubois, it has emerged that Daniel Dubois in that fight suffered both nerve damage and a fractured orbital bone over his left eye. So, quite a serious injury for Daniel Dubois. When you get injuries like orbital bone fractures and whatnot, that can drastically affect a fighter's career. Potentially, it could even retire them. I mean, if we look in recent years, guys who have had that injury, guys like Antonio Margarito or Kell Brook, after those injuries, those fighters were never the same again. So it is a serious injury. So Daniel Dubois going forwards, there are certainly question marks. Question marks in regards to whether that injury could reoccur in future bouts if somebody puts it on him and targets that eye. Could it reoccur? Will that eye ever be the same again? You know, it's definitely a concern if you're a Daniel Dubois fan. But in regards to question marks over his heart, I've got to be honest, I don't really hold it against Daniel Dubois for quitting in that fight with Joyce. He definitely quit. A lot of people don't like to say that word in boxing for whatever reason. He certainly quit, but to me, not all quits are the same. Certain fighters will quit when they clearly have more left in the tank, they're not that seriously injured. That's when criticism is valid in my opinion. But in the case of Joyce, I don't think that's the case. I think Daniel Dubois was badly gassed, he was getting beat up, and he had no answer for Joyce, and the injury that he sustained was serious. Like I said, that's a career-threatening injury. Not only a career-threatening injury, but that's an injury which can affect your quality of life going forwards. You know, when it's things like your eyes and whatnot, I don't hold it against a fighter for throwing in the towel. At the end of the day, there are more important things than boxing, your quality of life going forwards and whatnot. So, yeah, I don't hold it against Daniel Dubois for doing what he did in this fight. It wasn't like it was a Victor Ortiz scenario against Andre Berto in the second fight. It wasn't that scenario. He was fighting the best he could. He had his moments, but essentially he got beat down by the better fighter who had the better game plan. And you could tell that the power of Daniel Dubois was sapping. He wasn't going to knock Joyce out. He had a serious injury. So Daniel Dubois pulling out when he did, probably not the worst decision that he's ever made. Live to fight another day. If he stuck in there a few more rounds, he would have taken a beat down in that fight because he was gassing, he was tiring, the eye was shut. It was only a matter of time before Joyce really started to mix up his offense, because in that fight, Joyce basically won that fight with one hand, his lead hand, his jab, and his active guard. That's what won him this fight. And, you know, he could tell that Dubois was slowing down. He could feel that Dubois' power wasn't what it was earlier in the fight. And you saw in round 9 and round 10, Joyce was starting to use that right hand a little more than he was. And the last few rounds for Dubois would have been a beatdown. Joyce would have opened up, used that right hand, and he would have smashed Dubois to pieces. He really would have. And given the injury that Dubois had at that time, again, I'm not holding it against Dubois for quitting in this one. I'm not one of those fans who crucify a fighter for quitting every single time. Like I said, to me there's a quit and there's a quit. Certain quits I can understand. Others, when they have more in the tank, when they could continue, when there's no serious injury, that's when we criticise. But in this case, I don't really hold it against Daniel Dubois. But regardless of that, he's still going to get that criticism from the wider boxing public, and that's going to be hard to swallow for a young man. You know, Daniel Dubois is a very young man. He's very quiet, seems shy, and he was used to knocking over everything that was in front of him. Now he's had his first test, and he's been beaten resoundingly, and especially in which the manner it happened. There's going to be a lot of question marks, a lot of criticism. That's going to be the hardest thing for Daniel Dubois to get through. It's going to take a lot of mental strength, a lot of mental toughness, on top of that the serious injury that he sustained. So Dubois' boxing future right now, I wouldn't say it's up in the air per se, but, you know, because he's so young, but certainly he's in a bit of a tedious spot. This will certainly take some fortitude and guidance to come back from this. So I think Daniel Dubois really needs to evaluate his future in regards to the training scenario, His management team need to really look at the matchmaking for Daniel Dubois, because when you look at it, this was a massive step up. Who had Daniel Dubois fought before this fight? His best opponent was Nathan Gorman, arguably. And Joyce, obviously, Olympic silver medalist, great amateur, big lump, good chin. It was a massive step up and it backfired. So I think a long break is required for Daniel Dubois. A little bit of soul searching around people that he trusts. Recover with your injuries. And then some point next year, maybe in the summer next year, then you go again. But this time, avoid those knockover jobs. You need guys in there, not on the level of a Joyce, but guys who can test you, guys who can take you rounds and actually throw punches back. And use this fight as a springboard to analyse the flaws in your game and get better. The positive thing for Dubois is he's so young. At 23 years old, if you look at most of these prominent heavyweights that are competing right now, most of these guys at 23 years old were still in the amateurs. And obviously Dubois turned pro very young, so he needs to use these next couple of years, learning his craft, improving, becoming a little bit more dynamic, and increasing his skill set and getting better mentally. And listen, at 23 years old, he can still certainly come again. I'm not writing him off. I still believe there is talent there with Dubois. He does the basics extremely well. But again, he certainly needs to make improvements. But I'm not writing this guy off solely because he quit in a fight. Numerous fighters in the past have quit in boxing. Look at Vitaly Klitschko, for example, against Chris Bird. He quit in that fight, and he got slated at the time amongst the boxing media, but he successfully came back and had a really good career. Again, I'm not saying that's going to be the case with Daniel Dubois. I'm not saying Daniel Dubois is the 10th of a fighter that Vitaly Klitschko was. All I'm saying is we've seen guys in this scenario before come back and have good careers. So I wouldn't rule out Daniel Dubois, but certainly some soul searching is required, some recovery, and then, a better way in regards to guiding and matching Dubois' career going forwards, giving him the right fights, proper learning fights, guys who are going to come to fight and actually ask questions. And then maybe in 3 years' time, once Dubois gets back to this level against an elite opponent, he's going to be in a much better position and have a better chance of winning. But there we go. So according to Frank Warren, this is where I got the information from, Dubois suffered both a fractured orbital bone and also nerve damage to his left eye, which was the reason why he took the knee and quit the fight. Share your thoughts below. Are you in the same boat as me? Do you blame Daniel Dubois for quitting? Do you hold it against him? Are there fighters out there who would have carried on in this scenario? Of course there would have been. Certain fighters would have carried on, that is true. But at the same time, there are certainly a lot of guys out there who would have done the exact same thing in that scenario. So yeah, I don't really hold it against Dubois for going out the way he did, per se. It raises some questions, of course it does. But we'll just have to see what happens going forwards. But once again, what a performance by Joyce. Really, really impressed me with that jab. His feet in that fight were excellent. Really good footwork by Joyce. Quick feet by Joyce. He was the boss in there, the ring general. He fought to a game plan. And once again, I want to give credit to Joyce for proving me wrong. I picked Daniel Dubois going into this fight. So a big shout out to Joyce for really pulling it off against all odds. So big up to Joyce. It's certainly going to be interesting to see where he goes from here. Anyway, share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Del Boy. Peace.